So today we're going to be looking at conquering analytics. Now we're really going to nail down how you can demonstrate value through data across your firm. Now 2020 was a very strange year. I don't need to remind you about coronavirus and the global pandemic. Very, very odd. But what we have seen out of 2020 is a lot of firms creating really great content. So you've been sat at home, working from home, and you haven't been able to get in front of your clients to see them face to face, and you haven't been able to build that relationship with them in the same way. So we haven't been able to take them out for lunches, you haven't been able to go to events with them in person and network with them. So you've had to replace that, and you've had to become more connected with your clients digitally. And of course, one way of doing that, and a fantastic way of doing that, is by creating content and sharing your expertise. So we've seen a lot of that great content in 2020. Now, of course, what comes with a lot of content is a lot of data. So the more content you write, the more data you have on that content. So looking at the views of that content, how many people are actually reading it, the impact that all this content is having across your website. So, how much traffic it's driving in to all your pages, how much traffic from LinkedIn. And also you're getting lots of data from the likes of LinkedIn and Lexology and other distribution services on who's exactly engaging with those insights. So what organizations are reading them. So with all this data available, it can become quite hard to actually pick out the most relevant data and to make sure you're utilizing this data really effectively. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And really, one of my clients who's absolutely fantastic at doing this and demonstrating value through data is Rupert Winlaw. So thank you so much, Rupert, for joining us on today's workshop.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. And I'm loving my pre-lockdown haircut.
I'm sure a lot. I've just last night done exactly the same to my boyfriend's hair. But anyway, great to have you, Rupert. Rupert is a communications lead at Ropes & Gray. We've been working with Rupert for about a year now, and Rupert is responsible for driving the Passle program at Ropes & Gray. Rupert's done an absolutely fantastic job. Just looking at a few of the high-level stats, in the last year of using Passle, 32 of the Ropes & Gray lawyers have produced almost 300 insights using Passle, and that is equated to over 60,000 views of that content. So Rupert is absolutely fantastic at driving engagement and getting his fee earners to create content and really see the value of it. And one way he's doing that is by sharing a lot of data and a lot of feedback with those fee earners. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Strachan. I sit in the client success team at Passle. I work very closely with my clients to get the most out of the product, but also really help them in that content creation and how to best distribute and use this content. I've also got a background in analytics, so very keen to help clients with this data and see the value of that analytics and really driving content around the firm. Now, today's session, we're going to be focusing on 3 different sections. Now, I'm going to be pulling out examples of what Ropes & Gray and what Rupert's team have been doing for each of these sections, and then I'm going to hand over with a question to Rupert. As Freddie said, we want this to be really interactive. So if you do have any questions at all that you want me to ask Rupert, pop them in the Q&A box and I'll pull those questions out. But we're going to go through these 3 sections. Firstly, curation. So this is how you curate all those data sources that you have available to you and present it in one report or one form of feedback. We're then going to jump into fee earners. So really, how do you get the most out of your fee earners, but also how do you highlight what they're doing and showcase the value of this content creation around the firm? And then finally, going to finish up with recognition. So in a lot of professional service firms, there's lots of different teams. So what we call it is distributed leadership. And within those teams, everyone is driving their own business goals within that team in the organization. So actually, it's quite hard to know or to see what other teams are doing in terms of their content programs or other initiatives that they're running. But it's really important to promote the program that you're running and showcase that value across your whole organization. So we're going to touch on that at the end. Now we're going to jump straight into it. So we're going to kick off with curation. So what I have here is I have an example of a Q3 report that Rupert and his team pulled together to really showcase the value of content creation at Ropes and Gray. Now, what's fantastic about this report and what we really, really like to see is that Rupert has pulled out loads of sources to get this data. So just looking at that first slide, he's got headline numbers in there. So he's looking at the amount of content written, the amount of lawyers involved in that content, where they're from, which teams they're writing in, and then looking at Google Analytics. So Rupert has pulled out stats and data from his Google Analytics and then applied that to the feedback. There's also a nice slide on media profiles, so which publications the fee earners are appearing in and where they're getting a lot of interest. There's a slide on who is actually reading the content, so picking out those key firms who are engaging and liking and reading this content once it gets shared. And then also a nice example of a case study. So this is a fee earner case study showcasing some very specific examples there of some feedback and who's engaging, but also a really nice quote from the fee earner on their experience of creating content. So a really nice range of sources have been used to generate this Q3 report. And really that's how the value has been delivered. So there's qualitative and quantitative data, which is absolutely fantastic, not just focusing on those headline stats and the vanity metrics, we like to call them, but also digging a bit deeper. No excess information. So whilst in that Q3 report, Rupert pulled out lots of fantastic data. All of it was very relevant and all of it was very focused on the Ropes and Gray business goals and really very focused on the business outcomes and linking it back to those. So a really, really fantastic report there from a lot of different data sources. So my question to Rupert is, how do you select which data will be most effective in demonstrating value? I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, I guess to begin with, I guess I should start by saying, why am I doing this? I've been providing regular feedback on how the Passle platform has been performing for our London team since we started using the platform in February last year. And my aim has always been to demonstrate the value of the platform in order to encourage as many people either to carry on or to keep posting, and to encourage others to start posting, and indeed also to encourage others to share their posts with their contacts on LinkedIn and other social media channels. So I've been providing, since we've started, feedback on an ad hoc basis to those authors that have written their posts and just letting them know how their posts have been performing. Additionally, on a weekly basis, I've updated the whole office via our weekly newsletter with a roundup of the posts that have been written that week, in particular highlighting posts which have had high engagement rates, and I'm using that as an opportunity to encourage people across the office to share those posts. And as Sarah, as you said, from September, I started creating a quarterly report. I created another one for Q4, which I sent across to the office in January. But I started, as I say, in September to produce a quarterly report which provided full analytics of how our posts have been performing in that period. I've been sharing this, first of all, with all our partners in London, and then I've been sharing that kind of report again to the whole office via our newsletter. The approach is definitely working because we now have a third of our lawyers in London using Passle, and that includes 70% of our London partner group. And indeed, only this week, 2 more partners who have previously been reticent about using Passle contacted me about a post that they wanted to write. It's also worth stating that this feedback is playing an important role in driving behavioural change in how our lawyers are using LinkedIn as a business development tool, because having been virtually silent on social media in 2019, since launching with Passle, we've seen a 720% increase in activity on LinkedIn by our lawyers in London. So what data have I been using? Put simply, as Sarah's outlined already, I use every source that's available to me. Obviously, I'm using the data that's on Passle. That provides how many times an author's profile has been clicked into. It tells you how many posts that have been written, and also tells you about the LinkedIn analytics. I'm then supplementing this data with the information that's available on Lexology, which is a distribution platform for primarily in-house lawyers who have signed up to receive legal updates. This is definitely an invaluable data source, and I know most law firms have access to and use Lexology as a distribution channel. I think fewer law firms are probably using it for the data that sits behind it, but it's definitely it's packed full of useful data, and it's great because Passle posts are automatically shared on Lexology. Lexology not only tracks the numbers, but it tells you which companies have engaged with the posts. And very helpfully, it also has a facility to filter Passle posts from other content produced by the firm. I also use Google Analytics, which tells me how many people are coming into our website from LinkedIn via Passle. And from all those data sources, I am producing in my quarterly report a top 10 ranking for the most popular authors of that quarter. And that's based on the number of click-throughs that their posts have received, alongside the corresponding number of click-throughs that their profiles have received. And there's normally a nice correlation between the two. I'm also producing a top 10 ranking of the top 10 most popular posts of that quarter. I'm including a slide or two of logos of companies that have been reading the posts. I'm including a slide of media coverage that's been generated off the back of the posts. But the top 10 author ranking, I think, is the most valuable because it recognises the efforts and it celebrates the achievements of the posters, some of whom are associates, and it helps raise their visibility internally. And as such, I tend to lead on this when I'm publicising the analysis to both partners and to the wider office in our newsletter. And it's definitely having an impact because people are telling me, people are saying that they've been ranked highly, they're getting notes of congratulations by the members of the team.
Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, you definitely, in terms of using a lot of data sources, you're utilising it as well as anyone that I've known, and especially Lexology. It's really important that you pointed that out. We've actually had a question from the audience asking which platform did Rupert use to see who's reading their content. So I assume you've answered that with Lexology, but is there any other platform that you're looking at to get those firms who are engaging?
Lexology makes it really easy to see which companies. They obviously don't provide details of the individuals, but you can see the names of the companies that are engaging, either reading or printing or forwarding the posts that have been written. It's more cumbersome to track on LinkedIn because you've got to potentially track multiple LinkedIn accounts to see who is engaging with those posts that have been shared. So you can have a bit of you're never going to capture everyone, I think, that is engaged on LinkedIn in terms of the likes they've made or the comments, because you don't know, or at least I'm not aware of how you can track individuals that have shared those posts so that you can track their own profiles. So Lexology is definitely the one that I'm using, and I'm finding it very useful because it's all in one place.
Yeah. No, definitely. And we've got another question here from Mark. So he's asking about the content and if it ended up in the Wall Street Journal and the Deal, etc., and those other publications, and if so, how did that happen? Yeah,
so I guess that's referring to the logos of the publications in the previous slide. Any logo of a publication is basically it's achieved coverage in those publications. And simply, I'm using the content that has been written by, as a result of the post. It's being shared, obviously, on social media. I'm also using that content to pitch to journalists. And journalists are after content, just as we all are. If the content resonates with a journalist, if nothing else, it's keeping conversation going between the media relations team and journalists. Which is great just to keep Ropes and Grey front of mind with them. But if it resonates with them as a topic that they are interested in covering, well then, just in the normal way you'd imagine, interviews get set up and coverage is generated.
Brilliant. And a good question to follow on from that from Lydia. How did you know that the media were using the content for the commentary? So how did you know that the publications were picking up your insights?
Oh, because, you know, we're tracking coverage, as with all law firm. Any organisation will be tracking its coverage. I mean, in addition, you know, as well as tracking that coverage, you know, we are, you know, the communications team here at Ropes and Gray are pitching to those journalists. We're helping set up those interviews. So we often know that there is a piece of coverage that's going to kind of develop.
Great, and that's some really great feedback for the fee earners as well. How have they received that feedback when you told them that they've been featured in those publications?
Very positively. I mean, clearly it is the real goal is to start generating client conversations, and we have got one or two case studies of that actually happening. We've actually got a case study of actually leading to a direct mandate off the back of a post on LinkedIn, but they are much rarer. It's quite, I mean, I'm getting, since we've launched with Passle in February last year, so over 12 months, I probably had delivered about 40 pieces of media coverage off the back of the posts that have been written.
That's absolutely brilliant. So just really highlighting there that you've showcasing those different sources of data and utilising all the data you had available to you brings even more positive stories that you can share with the fee earners, and obviously that's going to showcase the value of that.
Exactly, and you know, I mentioned it earlier, Sarah. We've had a great case study which I shall be sharing in our next quarterly update to the London office, off the back of a post that was written last week. Not only did the lawyer get quoted, but actually there was a direct link to the post in the article itself, which is a first for me, and I think it's fantastic. And as a result, it's led to a real spike in the number of people that have clicked into the post.
Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. And that leads on really nicely to our next section, because what you've been doing really well and what's really important to do is to showcase the value to the fee earners so that they're actually involved in this content program. They're the experts that are going to be writing and sharing this content, but of course you have to get them on board to create this content initially. And what you've done really well in this feedback and what you just said you're going to be doing in the Q4 feedback as well is pull out these individual fee earner case studies. So a really nice example here again from the Q3 report is Aditya Khanna. You've given some individual feedback on one of Aditya's posts. You've looked at not only LinkedIn, again, you've looked in Lexology, you've pulled out the high level stats, but also who's engaging. And what's really nice with this case study is you've got a nice quote from Aditya as well. And Aditya's telling you about her own experience there and really promoting content and saying how easy it is to actually create this content. So not only are you showing the impact of Aditya's post, you're also showing and saying that it's really easy to do, and Aditya's saying that herself, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, a lot of that Q3 report was made up of that feedback. So there's 26% of it. So it's obviously very, very important. Lots of quotes and data combined. Again, really nice to see not only high level statistics that you're pulling out on his post, but also the quotes, and then also a wide range of authors. So in that example, that was just one fee earner, but actually across the reports, you pull out different examples of fee earners each time, different levels of seniorities and from different teams. Now, in terms of those fee earners, getting them into that Q3 report and your future reports, firstly, why do you feature fee earners? And then secondly, what is your process for gathering and featuring fee earner case studies?
Sure. Well, I mean, I've touched on this already, but it's all about recognising and celebrating the efforts of those who are posting, and it's all about trying to keep them posting and encouraging others to start. So you know, that's the reason I'm doing it. What's the process for gathering it? Well, I've got a lot of the information anyway. I'm featuring in those. You know, these case studies, a lot of the information that I've already included elsewhere in the kind of the report, i.e. it's evidence of how many and who has clicked into the post, kind of any major coverage that's been generated off the back of it. But the quote itself is, you know, it's fairly easy to get. I've created a set of questions that I ask authors of posts that have done particularly well in a set period. And I'm primarily interested in whether they've had any conversations with clients or targets as a result, whether any client contacts have liked their posts on LinkedIn. I'm asking how they have found the process. They found it easy, straightforward, and equally, would they recommend others using the platform? So it's, I've got that structured little set of questions, and off the back of that, I create a quote, get signed off, and I include it in the report.
Brilliant. And what we see there that's really effective is sometimes you have to chase those good news stories. So you've got the high level statistics in front of you, but actually in terms of getting the feedback from the author or knowing about content winning business or linking it to business goals, it's actually down to you to chase those stories and actively promote the fee earners telling you those stories as well.
Absolutely. But it's not, none of it is actually that hard to do. I mean, I come from a media relations background, and there's very little, comparatively, there's very little data you get when you are generating media coverage. Well, you've got a piece of coverage, you can count that, but beyond that, you've got no idea who's reading it, etc., etc. So actually having all this data at your fingertips, provided via Passle, via Lexology, etc., makes the whole process really easy.
Yeah, brilliant. And we've got a good question here from Wahid. With your lawyers, to what extent do you make the link to revenue generating conversations?
Well, currently we're not at that stage. We are all about profile raising. I mean, it's linking revenue with profile it's hard to do, isn't it? We're not there yet. If anyone else, maybe we can have a chat about that in one of the breakout sessions.
Yeah, brilliant. And then in terms of the fee earners, how in general do they respond to that positive feedback? Do you get feedback off the back of the reports that you send out? Do you see an uptick in content off the back? Do you have any teams that become particularly interested in content when you share that report?
Well, it's interesting over time. We have seen a nice steady uptick or trajectory of more people posting. As I say, we've a third of the office is now posting. 70% of our London partner group has posted at least one post. When we started, it was much more on the advisory side of the business that were posting, and kind of there are obvious reasons for that. They've got a lot more of opportunities to react to the world around them, i.e. there's regulatory changes, there's court judgments, whatever it is they can react to. The transactional teams, which is the heart of the business, have less to react to as such. They can talk about trends they're seeing. So has taken more time for the transactional teams to get on board. But we've definitely seen an uptick, and certainly since the beginning of January, since the beginning of this new year, January 2021, we've had, I think, 25 posts. Of those, over 50% have been from our transactional team. So that's really encouraging. I'm pleased about that.
Yeah, and it's really about the consistent feedback. So you're not just creating these feedback reports to get some teams or some fee earners active at a certain point. It's to keep that content going consistently. So actually the consistent feedback links with then the consistent content creation. It's not a one-time thing to create that feedback.
Totally agree. I totally agree. And there's definitely a lovely snowball effect. I'm getting now associates who are have become used to using Passle over the last few months, and they're now beginning to get it, in that they are thinking, right, we need to start raising our profile on XYZ issues, and we're going to start thinking about a pipeline of content over a period of weeks, months, that will keep our name associated with that topic or issue over a set period. And that's exactly where we are, the direction that we need to be traveling in. It's great that they are beginning automatically to be thinking in that way.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And then in terms of that report, Rupert, do you send that out just to those involved in the Passle programme and that specific content programme, or do you send that round the wider firm?
No, it goes to everyone in London. The reason I'm sending it to everyone in London is that I want as many people in London to start using Passle. whether they are creating content or sharing the content. We only, currently Ropes and Gray only uses Passle within the London office. I'm sharing it to a select number of people in the wider Ropes and Gray network, particularly on the communications side, just to keep them in the loop as to the success of how kind of Passle is performing for us in London.
Brilliant. And that leads on really nicely to the next section, because the last part we want to talk about is recognition. So how actually do you gain recognition from this content program and what you're actually doing? And of course, one way of doing that is by utilizing data, and I think we've seen that. But obviously there's the importance of actually sharing what you're doing firm-wide and not just within your specific team. Now, I know you wouldn't have mentioned this, Rupert, so I'm going to bring it up. You've recently, you and your team have been awarded the ACE Award within Ropes and Gray for your 10-year anniversary, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to let you explain a bit more about what that is, but the follow-on question that I want to ask after that is, what would be your advice for those driving value for their firms and trying to be recognised for it?
Okay. Well, thank you for flagging the award, Sarah. The award was actually for a broader campaign that we pulled together, which Passle was very much a central part of in terms of raising profile off the back of our 10-year anniversary. And it was, obviously very personally satisfying to be recognised internally for the efforts that myself and indeed others across the London office put into that programme. What would be my advice? Well, fundamentally, I think I've mentioned it already. Passle is a tool that helps drive behavioural change, and kind of feedback is essential to the whole process. We are trying to get lawyers to start using social media as an effective business development tool, and feedback is crucial to this. So really, I would be saying, if you're not already providing regular feedback, to your own teams, I'd make it one of your 2021 objectives. Because all I can say is my approach, which is basically a weekly update supplemented by a quarterly report, is working well for me. And as with all communication strategies, it's all about repeating.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely the value in sharing that firm-wide and not just with that select number of people involved in that content program, because you want to gain that recognition, but you also want to attract more people to create content. And that's what the feedback is going to demonstrate the value of.
Indeed.
Great. And we've got a question from Maeve. How do you measure and manage the quality of the content?
Well, in terms of the quality, there are very, have I, had to refuse a post because I didn't think it met a quality standard? No, I haven't. I think that that hasn't been an issue for me. And again, in terms of the quantity, well, we've had, Sarah, you mentioned the number of posts we've had over the last 12 months. I've forgotten the exact number, but on average, we've been roughly doing, or the teams have been posting maybe between 5 to 10 posts a week. So I haven't had a problem in terms of managing the quantity either. I found the process, once we get lawyers used to it, I think they realise that it takes minutes to do, and this is why I think a lot of them are increasingly buying into Passle, and I'm sure it's a message that you've heard before, but whereas writing a traditional client alert can take them and their teams days, maybe even a week to produce and get signed off, a Passle post can take minutes, literally minutes. And I've definitely had feedback from a partner who has had conversations with clients off the back of it, saying, well, that was a really useful 12 minutes of my time. So it's that sort of kind of value that Passle is able to generate, that it's almost like once you've got a sailing analogy, once you've got your yacht or your boat nicely kind of set, you know, towards the wind, etc., etc., you can almost let it sail for itself, and you're just doing little minor tweaks here and there.
Yeah, so it's worth putting time into getting it all set up, and especially on that feedback side, getting that template for the report, looking at the different data sources, because then once you've got it set up and you know where you're pulling the data from, it runs more on rails.
Yeah, exactly. So the Q3 report, yes, it did take a bit of time just to pull together. It's my first report that I produced. The Q4 report took a fraction of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So it gets quicker and quicker. And of course, then you can just keep an eye out for more data sources that become available to you, and more positive feedback to include in that report. Great. So Rupert, just to leave everyone with a last bit of advice. So obviously you've stressed the importance of delivering consistent feedback, and if someone isn't doing that already, to start doing that for their firm, to really promote the content program and show the value to the fee earners. For those who are starting out at creating this feedback, or for those who want to improve the way they're doing feedback currently, what would your one piece of advice be to them?
Well, I would definitely, if you're not using it already, I would, and in your firm has access to it, I'd definitely be doing a dive into Lexology, making yourself familiar with that platform, because there's a huge amount of data that you can get, and it's all there at your fingertips.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and there's many distribution platforms as well, but it's definitely making the most of the ones you have available to you, because a lot of clients that we work with, and a lot of people don't understand or realize the amount of data they have available to them on those platforms. So definitely have a look and research into those platforms, and into what data you can pull out and how you can make use of it. Brilliant. Well, that's everything we were going to cover today in our workshop. Thank you so much, Rupert, for your insights and your expertise. It's been really, really valuable.